Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesday of frequently asked questions. And this time I'm going to answer a few questions that are definitely frequently asked. Question number 1 is, what is crewel work? Which was a question I was asked about a gazillion times if I was ever at an exhibition, even a needlework exhibition. So far as I'm concerned, the definition of crewel work is wool embroidery onto linen. And that is the simple truth. If you stitch in silk or cotton onto linen, you could be stitching a crewel work design, but it is embroidery. And crewel work is wool embroidery. Question number 2. Why does my wool fluff? I don't like stitching with wools. And I fix people with my beady eyes and I say to them, how long is your thread? What angle is your needle? Remember to go back to the videos and have a look. Your thread should be no more than 15 inches long, whatever the type of wool. And when you're using a thicker thread, sometimes you need to have a shorter wool thread. The angle of your needle is incredibly important, because when the needle goes through the linen, especially when you're using linen twill, the linen parts and the needle makes a hole in the linen, and then the wool passes through the linen without fluffing. So as you go into the linen, just think of yourself as an Olympic diver. You don't want to make a splash with your feet. You don't want to go off to the side underneath the water. You go through the linen absolutely straight, accept the needle on the underside of your linen and pull it through and downwards, not across to the side. So that is my top tip. Question number 3. Can I use other threads? Well, I rather answered that in question number 1 when we decided what crewel work was. But yes, of course you can use other threads, and adding different threads and different textures is a fantastic way of making your embroidery look alive and current and have importance to you. But I would just have one caveat. Make sure that your linen is absolutely drum tight on your frame, otherwise the different tensions in the different types of thread might lead to puckering. So you don't want to be puckering your linen, and if it's loose on the frame, you may as well take up smocking, because it will always be creased, and that is almost impossible to get out even with the blocking process. So why is crewel work often called Jacobean work? Well, I blame the Victorians. They liked to name everything. And in this case, they slightly modelled it up. And in many books, you have Jacobean as a style that's described as James VI of Scotland, who came down in 1603 when Elizabeth died, and he was James I of England, and he ruled both countries together. Now, James I is very little to do with crewel work, although there might have been some crewel work around at the time. The Jacobean style that we look at is James II, which is very confusing because Jacobean furniture is definitely James I, who ruled from 1603. Now, Jacobean crewel work is actually in the 3rd quarter of the 17th century. So it's at the end of the era of stump work. It's after the era of black and red work. So, you know, when you look at the tree of life style and the multicoloured threads in wools, that's really mostly at the last quarter of the 17th century and the early part of the 18th century. And that's an era that people refer to as Jacobean. But in fact, it's mainly when William and Mary were on the throne and they brought their new trade routes and they brought their Protestant faith and they brought their peace and very good business sense and international trade to bear. And the influence of all that and the new wealth and the new styles and the new colours and the new dyes that came in are misnamed as Jacobean.